Recording. Hey, Charity, we are just getting the meeting room set up. So just so you know. Hello.
Can you hear me? You're on mute, Kat.
Hi there. Hi. Okay, sorry, we are having some technical difficulties. Sorry about that, everybody. We're in a new room and trying to figure out exactly how to get this to work where we can see you all on the screen and so that you can hear us. In the room, we have Isaac and Jane and Hannah and myself. So thank you for your patience. And you're unmuted. Okay, can you all hear me? Great, excellent. How to make it
I've never done.
video. Are you able to do the settings to turn your phone?
Yeah. How long you know?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
They were never, yeah.
Someone else is sleeping.
Eyes and stuff, I just know it, and you're in your PPS email.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Still not.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, everyone, we're trying to figure out this, like I said, there's some technical difficulties of.
Should we do what we did last time, Pat, where we just open up Zoom on our individual screens?
I think that that's gonna be easiest, and then I think we're,
So we should take the panelist link that you sent, right?
yeah. And we should be able to have everyone except for Hannah have their muted option on, yeah, mute. We're gonna do this. So that way, because the speaker is picking us up, you guys can hear me pretty okay, so, okay. So the speaker is working, it's just the camera. So that'll be, thank you, Jane, for problem solving, and then we can get started. It's on the calendar invite too, if that's helpful.
Oh, so the one that's there.
Yeah, that'll,
Okay.
you're automatically added as a
Okay.
panelist, so you should be able to just do it. You should, I mean, it should be, but that's just, everything's going. So we today, so. One more thing. So we had a trash. Oh.
Can't see. Oh, it's really shocking.
Yeah, you're. Okay, so everyone in the room is going to join with their video on, since the space that we're in is not allowing us to use the camera, and then just let me know if you have any issues.
Can we just do a sound check? Like each of you talk at kind of normal volume and make sure that everyone's getting picked up when we're good.
Sure, I'm not on yet.
But you don't need to be on the Zoom, just. Yeah, try it again.
Can you hear me okay?
Charity's not.
Charity's
in.
not.
And can you hear me?
Charity's not. in.
Charity's not.
Diane also. Dan, did you hear?
Okay, should we get started?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So this is a meeting of the Climate Crisis Response Committee. And I'll start with introductions. My name is Jane Colmalt. I am chairing the committee and I'm a PPS parent. Are you, Isaac?
Yeah, Isaac Barrow, PPS parent.
I can jump in and then we can, we'll go to the folks on the call here. Introduce, so I'm Kat Davis, I'm the climate justice advisor with Portland Public School District, and I'll pass it over to him.
Sure. I'll just hop over here. Hi.
I'm Hannah. I'm the Climate Justice Project Coordinator.
Okay, great. I'll pass it over to Diane.
I'm Diane Riley. I'm a PPS parent.
Great. And then maybe Charity, if you'd like to go next.
Yeah, hi, I'm Charity Fain, also a PPS parent.
Angela, you're available to introduce yourself.
We don't see Angela. Is she there?
She is, I think,
Hey, can you hear me?
yes, we can hear you.
Hi. Okay, Angela Long. I am a PPS parent as well.
I think since Angela's camera is off, and Hannah's displaying the meeting.
I'll be on camera in just 1 second. Yeah,
Yeah.
I do have to say that the audio in the room is a little choppy on my end. I don't know if other people who are on virtually are having the same problem. But it is cutting in and out.
Where's the mic?
The mic is the bottom.
It is still that.
Yeah.
Julia's trying to. I don't know if you saw
Yeah, I did, yeah. It looks like Julia's not in yet, but is working on
Okay.
joining us. Julie.
Okay, and I can't get onto Zoom for some reason, but I'm just gonna carry on. So the first item that we wanted to discuss, and Eric is in traffic. He's joining us late for other folks. Or you'll see him jump in at some point. So I wanted to talk about the board report. I think everybody hopefully has reviewed it. Thanks to everybody who provided input and feedback. That was really helpful. Thanks to Charity and Angela for serving on a working group with me, and especially Angela put in a ton of hours to get it to this stage that we're at. And I think overall, the messages that like we were hoping could come across were a desire to enhance transparency going forward. So first of all, like the work that was done, and let's just call this year one, fiscal year one, has been, we feel like PPS has made a genuine effort. Things are moving in the right direction. Lots of really important foundational work and groundwork. And I think including a lot of stuff happening sort of behind the scenes that's a little bit maybe invisible to compared to some of the bigger like project work, but important to build on and launch from in future years. So we're just glad to see all of that happening. And in terms of what we'd love to see more of going forward is improving accessibility to the information that the work that's being done to implement the policy. Probably the primary place would be the website, and also having not necessarily getting like, we still need that the dashboard, and let's call the one that we've been looking at and that Kat's been developing a kind of a project management dashboard, and then also having something that's more suitable for like a community facing type of dashboard that would be easy to access, easy to digest, and for students or anyone in the community to kind of find out and have a feel for their area of interest and what PPS is up to in that area. And so that can hopefully enhance the public engagement, some more focus on equity and like understanding the impact on frontline communities, or at least like bringing forward that thread a little bit more to the forefront so that the work in that area is more apparent. And recognizing there's a ton of work here, and we've got a fabulous climate justice advisor, and probably the work would go quicker if there were more resources put towards it. And so maybe there's some understanding that we don't have yet about the staffing and resourcing, but that's something we'd like to know more about in year two. So that's kind of an overview of the main messages. Angela, did you want to add anything to that?
I think you captured it pretty well. I would add, we've gotten some feedback since the report, we sent the report to Kat for this meeting. So we'll be making some minor changes for format, flow, things like that, but the content won't change significantly, just based on some of the feedback that we've received to date. So if there's any substantial changes that the committee wants, then we should talk about that in today's meeting.
Yeah, and the major changes that we were wanting to add just to augment the report is like an appendix with the actual documents, the policy, the charter, greenhouse gas inventory. We'd like to add a graphic timeline just to be a bit more visual, and also a figure that shows the greenhouse gases and kind of just kind of improving the visual aids, and then changing the headers to be slightly more descriptive, just improving those. So yeah, as Angela said, nothing substantive, but we hope it'll make the formatting of the overall report easier to digest for our audience as the board. So
we might add some,
Yeah.
Dave, we might add some clarifying context too, just based on some of the questions we got, like around some language and people wanting to know, what does this mean? Can you clarify this a little bit more? So those things we'll try to clear up and make it a little bit easier to read.
Yeah, thank you. And one thing that I wanted to highlight that I mentioned in the email notes in preparation for this meeting is we had previously been calling our groups that are outside of this meeting subcommittees. And we got some advice from PPS that a working group would be a more appropriate term. I think like anything that's called a committee has a certain feel to it and different definition than I think our purposes were. So you'll see we changed the title of those groups to be working groups. It doesn't change anything about what we're up to. With the one caveat that anytime a group of us meets and it's 5 or more people, then that's technically quorum for the committee. And that is subject to public meeting rules. So it would need to be recorded and public notice that it's happening and an agenda posted and that kind of thing. So not to say we can't do it, but just to be mindful of that. And yeah.
And I want to jump in really quick because Julia Director Brenda Burns was able to join us. And when Julia, if you're able to put on your camera, no worries if you're not, but then other people will be able to see your present. But you should be. Hopefully you can hear us as well and let us know.
Okay.
Sorry, it took me a while to get off mute, so I can hear you, and I will probably be at the meeting in 15 minutes.
Oh,
Thank you.
perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to open it up for comments.
Incredible. First off, massive thank you to the board report working group for the incredible work that clearly went into the document. I think it's a really good document. There's some very minor feedback. It sounds like there maybe isn't a need to discuss it tonight, but we can still provide some feedback.
Sure, yeah.
Not substantive, just small formatting suggestions.
Yeah, that would be welcome. And you could send that to Angela and Charity and I. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any other comments or ideas for improvement?
This is Diane, and I just want to echo Isaac's gratitude for the work that went into this. I really appreciate the effort. I thought it was an excellent draft, and I have just the most minor little suggestions. So I will send those on to Angela. Very minor. Thank you so much to the working group that pulled that together.
Thank you.
It looked like there was a note to discuss the date. Sounds like the 13th won't actually work.
Well, now it will.
Okay, good.
It's been settled on. So we will be presenting at the 13th. And for those members that can make it, that would be fabulous to have as many people out as possible for that discussion. And we will, in addition to this report, prepare a presentation and have about 5 minutes, I think, 5 to 10 minutes to
I believe so. I'll double
share
check with
the info,
Roseanne too.
just to give an overview of the report at that meeting. So if anybody is interested in like helping to present, just let us know. I think Angela and I are prepared to do it, but welcome others if anyone else wants to step forward.
It feels appropriate that you two, who did a lot of the work, should present.
And Barbie Alexander was just
I
able to
think,
join.
Hi, Barbie.
I think, hey, Angela here. I think that it would be great if committee members could show up at the meeting and support regardless of who presents. I think that it just is just really shows that the report that we are providing is supported by the committee members, and I think that there's kind of power in numbers too for the recommendations we have. I would want to just mention that if we do present on the 13th, we need to have any comments in the report finalized by what date, Jane? We talked about this today. I think we said the 10th. Is that
I think
right?
finals then, but I mean, it would be better for us if we got it a few days before that.
Okay.
Right?
So we'll shoot
So
for the
as soon-
6th.
Yeah, sure. The 6th would be good. Yeah.
And for those of you on the call,
Actually, I think it's before that, sorry to interrupt, but I think it's before that you have to have the board materials finalized. They changed the process and when it needs to be done. And Roseanne could tell you that, but we now get our board packets like 12 days in advance.
Roseanne had said that since this material wasn't being voted on, that they could take it up to the 9th to get it to you all. But I can double check with her again on that date.
That's true that we're not voting on it, but I'll just say, like, as a person who gets it, it's great to get it with the rest, get things with the rest of the packet versus like dribbling in. So the sooner you get it to, the sooner people have it, the more time they have to actually read through it. Because when we get stuff late, it then tends to sometimes, like, I already read the packet or something. So I try and get it as close to the time with all the other materials as possible.
Okay, well, Angela or I will follow up after this meeting and connect with Kat about timing, and we'll be specific about when we need your comments by. But suffice to say, if you have them now, just send them on over, please. Eric, we were just, and Barbie too, since you just joined us, we're just sort of talking about the board report and wrapping up our comments on that. If you had anything to add, we were saying we've got the latitude to make some formatting, or what we'd like to vote on tonight, or what I'd like to suggest we vote on tonight is that there's support for the document, the content and the substance of the document of the report, and grant us the board report working group the latitude to make some formatting changes, including adding some graphics and appendix and some small edits, but not changing the message. So if you had any comments you wanted to share here, now's the time. And you're also welcome to send us an email after if you have any of those kind of formatting edits. If there's anything of substance, we should talk about it in the meeting so that can be included in our discussion and vote.
Sure, second.
You good?
Yeah, I guess I had one question
Yeah.
for this, and as far as the content. A lot of this was great. Thanks for all the work on this. There was the one sentence basically a question was on the current pace and scope are not likely sufficient to meet the policy's goals and objectives by 2030 and ultimately 2040.
Mhm.
And I know the idea here, right, is that what we've talked about is how there's a lot of work that needs to be done in this first year to get the baseline and the work set up in the dashboard. But just if we have the information to say that definitively that they won't be able, they can't reach the 2030. It's a little bit of wordsmithing. I was wondering if we're saying just it's fairly bold as far as they're saying they won't make the 2030 commitment if they don't change that. So it's a question to the board if that's what was intended, or if it's trying to drive some of the other positioning that was in this about how the baseline of this has been set, and that there needs, and the next stage is this increase of speed.
Mhm. I mean, I think that you've pointed out, no, there's not like a data trajectory necessarily. Although I think if you looked at the greenhouse gas inventory and the projects that have been completed this year, you know, so who's got the best fit line for what we expect going forward? So what would you suggest as a alternative? What do you think would be like language that you'd be more comfortable with?
If we had it, so it's are not likely sufficient to meet. I guess it does say the current pace and scope. So I think if there's something to recognize.
I think, Eric,
Line
the
work.
point that you make is,
Go ahead.
I think the point you make is a good one. I think what you're saying is it warrants some sort of like, how do you measure that? You know, how did you come to that conclusion? Something more definitive. I think another way that we could address it is by saying what we're interested in is seeing how PPS intends to meet that, meet the pace of the policy. And that could be, you know, what's the staffing plan? What are the resources that are going to be put in place in order to meet the policy? What are the major milestones that we'll hit? And I think that was one of the comments that we got today regarding the timeline and milestones and how do we show progress, both what we've done today and then how we'll meet that in the future. I don't know, Jane, did you want to add anything to that?
And that does, I mean, that dovetails into the transparency, it's one of the transparency section, I guess, too, with that sort of description of that. So I guess that makes sense of that, of acknowledging that the first year was a baseline of the growth, and then there needs to be, then you have the enhanced transparency section, which I think does discuss a little bit of what you mentioned as well just now.
So not to delve into solution, but is it more of just a small caveat of, however, based on evidence to date, the current pace and scope are not likely to be sufficient to meet the policy's goals? Because it feels like what you're trying to allow room for is that there could be a hockey stick effect, given foundational work in the first year.
Right. It's
But
mostly
without
acknowledging.
I think the report needs to also point out that without a clear commitment to that hockey stick of resources, the goals aren't going. Right? Like just because it's not evident that the pace is sufficient the first year, doesn't mean the goals can. There's an appropriate risk to be called out.
Yeah, I mean, I think to me that we're just, if it is this hockey stick analogy, we're just calling it, we're on the blade, like we're not on the shaft. And it's not, to me, it's actually not super bold or controversial. Like I don't think that staff feels like we're like shooting up yet either. So
I guess the other question to ask is, what's the risk of stating it this way?
I think that was Isaac that was talking.
Yeah,
Am I right? It was hard to hear your question.
Yeah, I just, what's the risk of stating it the way it currently is stated? I'm not sure I understand that.
Yeah, I guess, so do we need, I guess the question, if we need to add anything of recognition that the pace will need to increase. It's in here. It felt the question was basically.
I think we could, Eric, I think the point that you made is a good one. And I think we could soften the language because CAT is one person and it's a very progressive policy. We want to ensure that we kind of raise awareness to the need for additional resources and staff in the future. While it was probably appropriate to have CAT here this year to set everything up, I do see as the pace of this policy progresses that we might need more CATs to help us with this. So that's, I think, just like raising that kind of awareness is important. And then we could soften the language so it doesn't seem, I guess, so forward. Eric, I think if you've read this and that's the takeaway that you got, you're probably not the only one who's going to react to that sentence when somebody reads it for the first time. So I think it's fair.
And maybe it's recognizing that the baseline work has been done this first year. There's a recognition that now we've gotten through the first year that the pace and scope will need to increase to sufficiently the future goal.
I don't know that Charity has her hand up.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks. I guess I'm going to make the case that I don't think the language needs to be softened. I think it's part of our job to raise awareness on things if we see it as a concern. And I work in construction, and we're not on pace to make that. Like, construction takes a long time, and these are some big jobs that we're talking about doing. And it's going to take a heavy lift and a lot more action to get there on that kind of construction side. So I don't know why we'd be afraid. I don't think it was particularly harsh language, or I just think we should be saying what we think and not try to think about like making it softer. We should just be honest. And I don't think it's a reflection on like the current staff. It is a reflection of the system. And, there's a really good goals, and we should be honest about whether like the current system is enough to get us there. And we don't think it is. So I don't really think we should soften it because somebody might read it wrong. That's, my opinion.
It might be middle ground of keeping that as it is, but adding like that first phrase at the beginning of that sentence of recognizing the work that's been done in the first year.
Yeah, and I
then
think
you can
we
still
have,
keep the tone of that
yeah.
second sentence as it is. If there's still interest to be able to be that clear in that, it maybe just as the first half of that sentence has some sort of recognition of now we've moved on. That might be it.
Okay, good.
If the interest is still to keep that language as it is, to recognize the amount of work that needs to be, which makes sense, but maybe just that a phrase like that at the beginning.
Okay, thank you for raising that. And I wonder if Barbie, you hadn't had a chance to share your thoughts yet. Not that you have to, not to put you on a spot, but if you wanted to chip in.
Yeah, I'm actually thinking about, I'll be honest, I am in support of charity. And I think that it is more important to be transparent. We can't control how people take things. And if the information is transparent and true to what we know, that's defensible. And so I think it's important to be transparent. So, and if that information is not conveyed clearly, if it feels like after you read it, like, oh, well, it's like, oh, no, I know exactly what's happening. That's how I want things to land. And like, I was just reading something, like, for example, that we made a recommendation that the final product include, and we removed would like to see more data. as it relates to frontline communities. I suggested maybe a change that the frontline product include data disaggregated by ethnicity and zip code. That's specific. That's a specific deliverable, not impact by frontline communities. We would like disaggregated data.
Barbie, did you?
And so I'm always gonna be.
Sorry, did you put that
What?
edit into the document at some point? I know, I didn't see that. Or is that new edits you're gonna suggest after the meeting?
I did it just now.
Okay, okay, good. Oh my
I was
God.
just, no, I was actually going through while you were talking. I was thinking, yeah, because I was feeling that same thing. Like when things are kind of nebulous, I don't feel like it has the same impact to the people that are reading it. And because it's such a wide variation of understanding and knowledge base of people who may potentially see this data, I think it's $10 words, if I'm being honest. Because I think ambiguity is an enemy of moving forward.
Okay, well, I think that we can work with all that. Angela, are you comfortable with
Yes.
moving forward?
Yeah, I might reach out to people individually just to try to recap as I go through the document and try to refine some of this stuff. I guess I have a general question. Does the committee collectively agree that resources are going to be needed to support this policy?
More resources.
More
Yeah.
resources.
Most
This is Diane.
definitely.
Yeah, this is Diane, and I can't underscore it enough. I just feel like on every level, we need more resources. And in terms of being specific, I would like to say staff, but I don't think we need to go that. Maybe we don't need to go that deep yet. But yeah, we need more resources, 100%.
And I think the report does a good job calling this out, but I would say it's not just resources. The shift from foundational assessment level work towards acceleration and implementation of projects that drive meaningful outcomes, that's a significant shift for any organization to make. So it's not just resources, but a strategic alignment, willing to adjust individual department plans, accelerate and invest on the basis of specific outcomes. So like there's a strategic and mindset shift that needs to permeate within the large organization beyond just resources.
I think we were trying to tap into
Okay.
that organization development, support from leadership, commentary part.
I agree with Isaac, and I would like to see maybe a little bit more operationalized strategy around that, and what that looks like. For example, using results-based accountability, and then having those metrics be in a scorecard so that it's as real time as possible, and we have that target that is really clear where we are, where we need to go, and
She freeze.
Yeah, Barbie, I think you froze for us. How?
Sorry, Barbie, you're frozen for us.
Well, Barbie's coming back on. I'll say that it sounds like generally we all agree with what's in the report. I think I hear general concerns from Eric that, if we make statements, we should be able to support them and have solutions on how to move forward. That's kind of generally what I took away, Eric, from what you mentioned. And then from others, I heard we really feel having some very concrete recommendations that are not, that are very forward on what we're hoping to get out of the committee going forward. Those statements should be very clear. And that was a comment that we received earlier today, even if it's just having one very clear, concise sentence that we bold that allows the reader to walk away with what are we trying to get out of the report? What's our recommendations? So that's something that we plan to integrate into the report as well. And so did I capture those notes from everybody on what we're hoping to get out of the next phase of the report?
There's general nodding. I'm not
Yeah.
sure how much that.
Okay. Well, I'd like,
Yes. I saw the virtual nods and also some of the nods in the room, Isaac.
I apologize that I'm not on camera. I just can't get onto the Wi-Fi here and get my Zoom up. So I'm looking at you all on the screen here, but sorry, you can't see me, or I think Eric's in the same boat, but I'd like to suggest that we move forward on a vote then to adopt the report, the content of the report with the latitude for some formatting and minor edits to be presented at the board meeting on June 13th.
I second that motion.
I think that's all we need. Okay, thank you, everybody. And yeah, please do get your comments in soon. And
Do we
then-
need an official vote after the second?
Oh, all in favor, I guess. Is that it?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, then the motion is carried. And now I'd like to turn it over to Kat. Sorry, we took longer than
Oh, that's all right.
expected on that item.
Oh,
For
that's
a
great.
staff report.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to invite and see, Hannah, would you mind actually like logging out, try logging back into Zoom to see if did you already try that for the panelist thing? Are we gonna like shut down? Well, I was just gonna see if you could do that really quick. Okay. Sure. And while Hannah does that, I will unmute myself so you can hear me.
Sorry, today is a day of some technical difficulty, so I appreciate everybody bearing with me here. So for the staff report side of things, I can share that we are finishing up our annual report right now, which we will be sharing with our leadership team, as well as relevant department stakeholders that oversee scopes of work that relate to the policy the first full week of June. And then we'll be presenting our report alongside you all at the June 13th board meeting. So we're just like wrapping up all of that. And when we're ready to share our materials to the board, we'll also share it with this committee. I can share that. So let me know when you come back on and I'll look up for you. I have updated the policy progress dashboard that I wanted to share with you all as a way to kind of get a pulse. And I think the purpose of the dashboard this year was to help communicate and organize the strands of work that are related to moving forward on our policy so far, and to help us map out and to communicate with the community what work is already taking place, because we know that this policy did not initiate climate action at PPS. So a huge part of this workload has been like trying to just understand. Oh, you're back. Oh, Jane's here. Hi. Okay, you should be a panelist now. Yeah, so just trying to understand where each of these different scopes of work live, so we can understand better the history and the culture, and what we can do to amplify things that are going really well and where there are gaps that need to be filled. Hannah's back.
Yes, and then if you give your computer the camera as that camera is your camera, then they should be able to see us.
we'll make this technology work whether it likes it or not. Okay, now that we're getting all of this coordinated, I will share my screen. Just to be able to walk through some of the changes that I made to this dashboard. And then I can talk a bit about what we are looking at moving forward over the next year in terms of like direct how I hope to see this work progress. Because, you know, as a person working in change management and who also absolutely, I just see a real need of culture shift and a real opportunity to mobilize and provide some silo breaking activities around this policy. And just kind of the opportunity that provides. I just been, you know, I can share that that's something that we'll need to see over the next year for sure. So I adjusted our phase approaches from what I had shared last time to better align with the Innovation Studios approach to change management that they put together to support the development of the Center for Black Student Excellence. That's another initiative that requires just a really robust cultural shift at PPS and is also going to require some significant resources. And there's a lot of inherent underlying goals around racial equity and social justice that translate between that initiative and the initiative of climate justice at PPS. And so we're working closely to look at like, okay, how can these big cultural shifts be working in alignment to create a shared language at the organization. So the way that I've adjusted sort of how we're identifying phases of work and what those phases of work will look like moving forward is through centering our first phase, which is still clarify around understanding relationships, healing, and history that interprets findings. I need to edit that, as well as engaging with historical context, interpretation, and concerns for each policy goal. So that's something that we've been working on internally, primarily over this last year to really understand what is the history and what, like, where is this existed at PPS, what have the barriers been? And then next year, really shifting that conversation to the community and understanding how are our students envisioning themselves in this work? What do they see as our biggest obstacles and opportunities, as well as like community spaces, teachers, things like that. And then ideating, where we're looking at how to engage stakeholders and to understand potential solutions, envision what this looks like as a, you know, moving forward together, and understanding the external consequences for each policy goal. And that part of the work has really been also in terms of like defining our policy indicators, and which are going to be the metrics for how we measure progress, which is that scope of work that I shared with you in the past that we're working with Echo Northwest to finish. Their final deliverable will be shared with us June 2nd. So I'm happy to share with you all that then as well. They actually, to echo what Barbie, that was Barbie. Anyways, sorry, I might have missed that around disaggregating data. They have the same recommendation of when you all are collecting this data, reporting it, this is something you both need to be considering. So all of that will be really helpful, and when we're thinking about building out these tools for evaluation. And then the next phase is prototyping, where we engage stakeholders to co-create plans and refined plans, policies, and programs that will advance and identify policy indicators and goals. I also think that has to do with some like pilot programming that we'll give a try. And then finally, it's implementing these different plans and policies and programs, creating pathways for iterative feedback. The timeline I put together at the bottom with the different quarters hasn't really changed. It just kind of goes over like basically each quarter up to like fiscal year 2027 of quarter 2 there, just to kind of overlay the next, you know, 4 or 5 years of work of how we envision this moving forward at a really broad strokes level. And then over the next year, it's really like fine tuning, like what are the actual benchmarks and metrics that we'll be able to see growth in for each different policy indicator that will be able to use this strand of work from Echo Northwest to better measure and like just really make progress on those goals. And then I added, after our discussion last time, I apologize, this is such a monster of a spreadsheet. It's hard to share on the screen. But just to kind of give a high level overview, and this is all linked in the agenda and public notice as well. I went through and added
more strands of work are that we've been able to like track down and better show material progress on. So I have to also make it a little less thick. I have a brief description and then the materials progress of like the significant, especially numeric opportunities to show like progress on different strands of work. And then have also begun better articulating engagement framework that we're using to like center this work and how we're centering frontline communities as well as impacts on communities. That all has some work to be done to kind of better flesh out, but I just wanted to share this as a resource that again mostly articulates our current state at PPS with a couple strands that articulate what we're going to be working on moving forward, such as a decarbonization implementation plan where we will be working with a consultant to understand like what, given the many different conflicting priority, I'm going to say complex priorities around our aging infrastructure at PPS, how we can reach our 2030 and 2040 goals, and actually like having like a really clear roadmap about how to do that in a way that is really equitable and serving our underserved communities and prioritizes climate resilience, but also recognizes the like challenges around an aging infrastructure. So that's an example. Yeah.
PA and MBI. That's really good to see what fantastic.
Yeah, that we were really impressed with their proposal that they put together. So we're just finalizing what that contract might look like or how we can figure out how to, fund and really see that work move forward. So that's why it says like in a little pre-work session is, okay, we got the contract, like we got the RFP and the proposal, and now we're trying to negotiate with them what this looks like, for the next steps. But that was, that's a really exciting strand of progress that we're hoping to see move forward. But yeah, so I just wanted to share this for some light reading. The annual report that I'll be sharing with the with you all and the board will capture this current state as well as have a section for identified challenges and recommendations, and also be able to better articulate what it means to center climate justice and a climate action plan like this as we approach. So I'm excited to see how that all comes together. I'm eager to share it with you all after I have a chance to share it with our leadership and get their feedback and buy-in around how we're going to mobilize some of these strands of work over the next year. And beyond. Yeah, that's kind of my that's what I've been, living and breathing for the last couple of days, weeks. So any questions so far?
I'm curious about the extent to which other folks throughout the organization are touching this dashboard and like involved in providing the content, and like, are you quarterbacking and you've got other people filling in, or how's that going?
Yeah, I have some really amazing colleagues here that have been really helpful in co-writing our report and helping to gather, share whatever data that they have, and they've been really engaged. Quite a few colleagues across the organization that have been really engaged in the Echo Northwest data collection lift. So that has been super helpful. And as a change management plan and strategy, I've just been looking at the like ADCAR change management principles. I could go into it, but it's basically starting with how ready are we for change, and like what is the awareness level about the need for change in these different areas. So the folks who've already been really engaged in strands of work that inherently have moved forward different climate action at PPS have been the most engaged and aware so far of what this lift takes. So we're like transportation and energy and sustainability. A lot of the folks that you all have actually had a chance to interact with our presentations, our science, especially folks in Office of Teaching and Learning are super engaged. So they've been able to really help set the stage of what this current stage looks like, and then have been able to connect with some of the departments that have been maybe less aware of how this would directly affect their work. But once you get a chance to talk with them, they're like, oh yeah, I totally see how this is like super connected, or how we have this opportunity to create these more better resources for students And that will help us understand over the next year how to shift away from the usual suspects and like really focus on the people who are doing some of that, the other work in this policy that's so exciting that's not as like immediate that you see in other organizations, like the mental health support resources for students, or the as it relates to climate change, or understanding what climate resilience can look like and things like that. So the really short answer is it's been a lot of like me leading, I don't know, quarterbacking perhaps, but then having some great colleagues that have been able to jump in. I feel apparently I'm very wordy today, so thanks for bearing through that answer. But I do think that there's a real, one of the things that I'm excited to see develop and hope to see us be able to coordinate is a really solid, centralized group of just core staff that oversee broad scopes of this work that can be kind of the advisory team. Because there's certain like negotiations of trade-offs in this policy that we start to see come up as we get further into implementation. I remember, Diane, you had mentioned like, there's going to be bumps on the road and it's just going to keep being bumpy because we're implementing this huge thing, and we're starting to see that already. So just making sure we have a really clear and transparent process for how we negotiate those bumps and can communicate whatever trade-offs that are being made to the committee and get community engagement is really important. So that's some other things I'm excited to see now that we have a better understanding of what is actually needed and where this work lives.
And the decisions on those trade-offs will be communicated in the dashboard.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question about how.
But that was one
where
of the
would
things
be.
way back, one of our
Yeah.
early ones we talked about, that when we were talking about some other topics, well, when you had sort of the visibility to where those trade-off decisions were made, and it helped for
Yeah.
clarity and understanding.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's really important to think about how we communicate how these decisions are being made, and actually have an example where, if we have time today, I would love to get your feedback on like, okay, we're coming up against this challenge, and if you all can help us understand from the community perspective what kinds of indicators would be helpful to understand why a certain decision was made, then that can help us communicate that to, you know what I mean? And so that's something I hope to be able to actually like practice today if we have time. But I appreciate that input of like where this will live. And I do want to, I am so fully in support of like something that's usable. So I wanted to share, I'm going to bring on 2 high school summer interns that are going to help us take the strands of work in this policy dashboard and turn it into some kind of like story map at the very least, so people can clearly see like what's happening. And then as we get more data to support things, I think having something that's more metric based would be really exciting. But all of this to say, I was appreciative of the recommendations you all made, because I was like, I see that need. Yeah. Anyways,
Hey, Kat.
go ahead.
Oh, Kat, this is Barbie. I just wanted to throw out there, I've been recently working with a community-based organization, ELSO, Earth Life Science Organization, if you're familiar with them. And they actually have a very large cohort of students age 14 through 29. They're all students of color in the Portland area that are centering on architecture, engineering, construction, and they're also focused with a focus on sustainability. They would absolutely love to be able to partner, and they have students, and they are students that are specifically interested in this type of work that I think would be well suited. And I can connect you with their director if you want.
I would love that. That sounds great, especially as we're looking at some real engagement opportunities and vision strategies, and as capacity for bringing on. I mean, if there's like a student that wants to get the opportunity to be on like the planning side of things and create internships for that pathway, like there's all sorts of, that's very exciting. So thank you for sharing.
And we're actually going to do 2 interns in our planning department as well. So yes, exactly.
Yeah. And I see your question in the chat around, can we ask for the EUI or energy use intensity to be adopted? I will ask Aaron if, I think you all have met him, our energy and sustainability senior manager, what the technical standards that they're updating, if that's included in that, or what the current threshold is. Oh, yes, I would love to create a document for this committee of just like awesome organizations to work with. Sorry, I just saw Charity's chat for those who might be watching this that says there's also Blueprint Foundation for Portland Youth Builders. That's very exciting. But I will get back to you on the EUI question and just kind of learn where we're at, because I know anyways. I don't want to pretend like I know exactly what the plan is for, like, for instance, Jefferson and things like that. But I can do that, sure.
Well, and a lot of the recommendations, funding, just so many things are looking at the EUI. It's a requirement, and it's also something that is measurable and trackable in terms of if you're doing something, how are you reducing specifically. And so it's a great standardized metric, and I didn't see it reported at all. And so I would like to see that called out. That's why I asked, but I didn't know if it was possible or not.
Yeah, I know it's definitely possible for us to have to, and that would be a really interesting data point to be able to share, like which buildings have certain. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Yeah.
I feel like Aaron's report they did from months ago included UI assessment.
They definitely track.
Yeah,
I thought it was in the policy, actually, that might not have ended up in there, but there was a target around the UI. It's in the policy.
I think it gets a little trickier when you try because it's an efficiency measure. It needs to be measured, needs to be reduced. There's also the emissions correlation to. But yeah, I'm looking. Thank you for calling it there.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, it's like I know we track it, but I don't know exactly what it is that we're shooting for, as well as where each of our buildings stands, which I think are two important questions. Yeah.
Zero, net zero. That's what we're always shooting for.
Great. Any other questions? Okay.
How was the and I apologize, I did not spend enough time with the dashboard.
Oh, that's okay.
But how is the risk assessment column doing as we near the end of the year? How are you feeling about the risk assessments across the areas?
The risk assessments and like in terms of like risk management.
Yeah.
And how our community is responding to the crisis.
I thought I may be misremembering. It's been a couple of months. I thought on the other dashboard we had talked about, and not was adopted, but the sense of for each policy area and then each larger pillar having some sense of whether the goals seem attainable given current actions in progress.
Oh, I see.
And we may not have implemented that in the dashboard, so I apologize if that's the case.
Yeah.
Questions.
I think that will be part of the so the challenge with some of the different policy sub goals is that some of them have really clearly defined outcomes, and some of them don't have as clearly. They're more vague in terms of like how we might measure progress on it. So I think we'll be able to track the feasibility and impact of each, like of how to work towards different indicators once we are able to better define those like indicators of how we'll define success around, for instance, minimize disposable materials was one of my favorite examples of like it's a great goal, but then being able to define like what is actually like the measurable target that we're headed towards, and then we'll be able to create like that risk. Yeah, and so that's the work that we've been doing with Echo Northwest, is to create those like measurable targets to work towards. Yeah.
So that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
Just trying to relate it back to the earlier discussion about
Yeah.
like shift from foundational work
Yeah,
to
definitely.
measure based on.
That is that transition that we're currently in. And then with that as well, their scope of work will identify what kinds of evaluation tools we need to be implementing over the next year to get the baseline data for the things that we didn't have data for, as well as the things that we need to just better define or tease out some more, get some more community input on how we want to define those goals, because still after this work, there's some like nuance. This is where we're like, we need to like really land in on what does this mean.
So hopefully you can use the, like, the committee could support that process.
absolutely, yeah,
Provide some info on that.
yeah, that would be great. I think that's such a great space for this, especially if we can encourage like the opportunity to really share this as a space where the public could engage with some of these materials beforehand, even better, so I'm better prepared, and then come and be able to have that be like a public discussion too. But I think that would be a really great use of the sometime in the next year as we get that next phase better teased out. So
Thanks, Kat.
Yeah.
For that report. I think I wanted to just touch on the schedule for the next fiscal year. I don't think we're not gonna like pull out our calendars here and nail down dates, but generally, I just want to get a sense from folks on the committee, and maybe the best way to do this is like a little survey after this. But the questions are, I was proposing to meet in September, November, January, March, and May, so 5 times next fiscal year as a full committee. Does that feel like the right frequency? And then also, do Thursday nights continue to feel or work for people next year? And is this time of day good, and the length of the meeting? So I'm going to suggest that we do that just by email or survey after this. And so watch for that and reply with your preferences, especially strong preferences. And then we were going to talk a little bit about student member recruitment. I think this is our last scheduled meeting for this fiscal year. So Richard had sent an email with some notes, his comments for the meeting, and he had said he supported the board report as is. It's Richard and Danny's last opportunity to meet with this full committee. But it's great. I'm so grateful that we have 2 student positions. It's really nice to carry that forward, and I hope we get another strong pool of applicants. Do you want to speak to that, Kat, the process at all?
yeah, we are finalizing the Google form for submitting applications, and we'll get that sent out as soon as possible. And
If anyone wants to weigh in now on the types of questions we'll be asking for that, but I don't.
Yeah. I'm not, because we weren't able to share it before the meeting, so I'm not sure if that is a replan. But we can definitely share it out, and then if folks are able to, because it's a very similar form to the one that you all filled out last year. And so just getting that finalized and then sent out through our different teacher groups, and we would love if you all could share with students that or spaces that you're in. Perhaps those we could share it with those organizations that were already listed that really directly support student engagement. And then in terms of reviewing applications, last year it was 2 of our board members as well as a student reviewing applications. And so I didn't know for this year for adopting if that's the process we wanted to take again. I think, or yeah, that process. This was my very first activity when I started last year, so very near and dear to my heart. And Julie, I don't know if you have any recommendation or thoughts about doing that process again that we did last year.
Of the reviewing of the applications.
Yeah, and having it be the board members, and potentially we could invite one of the students that served this year to review for next year's students, or I'm not sure what your thoughts are.
Yeah. Because we have board members cycling off, I mean, it may make sense to have one board member, like either Michelle or I, who did it last year, and then maybe somebody to committee if somebody's interested, and a student.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to, I think it'd be useful. Last year we had a great group of student applicants, so it'd be great to talk about so how we can spread out the applicant and really get people to encourage to apply. I think one other thing, just a lesson learned from last year on the students, is before they apply, make sure, and I don't know if this is the and sort of the intro to the application, but to make sure that people really have the capacity to serve. Because otherwise you go through and like you weed out, some great candidates and you get down to two and then answer for whatever reason. So to try and really, and maybe by the time we send it out, we'll have at least a sense of like, here are the 6 meetings.
I think
Here's
that's
the date
super
we're
helpful.
there, here's the day of the week they are, so that should give people a sense of like, oh, I'm involved in sports all year round, so this is gonna work, or whatever it is, or because we had some great candidates, to just and unfortunately we had to go through quite a few things. And also the people like, I guess another question I would have is, do we want to have seniors, just knowing that to get this point in the year, they're kind of done. And so maybe it's really focusing on the sort of sophomores and juniors as this opportunity. And just lessons learned to maximize the participation, who will accept. And we also had, I think, really strong diversity last year in terms of the applicants, which would be great to have again this year. So we're not planning to go to the district student council. I think the district student council tapped the 2 students this year to have their networks.
Yeah, that's really great feedback all around. I think being able to have that expectation of meeting dates beforehand will be super helpful. And then also maybe language around, you can expect to engage in this amount of time's worth of work between meetings too, to just let them know that there is some pre-work before each meeting that will be expected as well. So
Can I ask like how much time that is for you all? Like how much, yeah.
or how much we might expect the student to
expect
participate.
the student to do it, yeah, trying to put that in the form right now.
Do they have any sort of special role in this summit?
Not this year. We had invited Richard to be a student panelist, but he was out of town at a really cool debate team thing.
Because it seems like, coming to meetings and being on the oversight committee is one thing, but I think that gets you a certain type of student. So maybe if there's also some other place where they also can be a leader among students, in addition to the adults. I think that's always a great opportunity because it also is a great recruitment tool. So if you have 100 students coming to a climate summit and they see somebody who's been on the oversight board, like, oh, that might be something I want to do or how I want to contribute. I know that's how we get like people on this district school council and then
Yeah. And we had mentioned this opportunity at the climate summit, like keep an eye out, this opportunity is going to come up. And so I think being able to send this out to the teachers that attended to kind of replant that seed with their students would be.
like having them like do the welcome at the beginning or something that
Other folks.
gives them a leadership role.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I like that idea for future planning of events. And then I think that'll also feed into what more community engagement like over the next year as a whole. Better invite especially the students to get involved. So great. So we'll send out that application as soon as it's done. It should only need a couple. Thank you.
So just on one last point, when do you expect that process to be? Just thinking when the first meeting is, to want to make sure that we get the student reps so that they come in at the start of the process.
Yeah, the last year all the committee applications were due by June 15th. And then it took us a solid I think it was like a whole month and a half or so to fully review everything, but that was with like 90 total applications. And so I think it depends on when the start. I think we said September would be the start date for committee meet, or yes. this committee meeting?
Yeah, although it does raise the question that I forgot to mention about the scheduling is there had been a discussion at a previous meeting about doing a kind of climate crisis response committee summer retreat, kind of like a meeting that could dive into, well, I'm not sure yet. It wasn't really clear to me what the objective was for that. And I think it was just an idea that was floated, but I do think we should like talk about if people do want to pursue that, and if so, what would the goal for that be? And if we did that, like one benefit of doing that, I think is an opportunity for some orientation for a new member, especially a student. But because this year we won't have any new community members. But in future years, we will be having that turnover. So the idea of a so-called summer retreat as a orientation, I think could be really helpful if that's the way that we ran it, so that we can start in September, like start working kind of thing, come to the meeting ready to move forward with the oversight of implementation as opposed to like getting familiar with what we're doing here. So in that case, I think we need August would kind of be when we do that. So we need to have a student member chosen, selected before. But it sounds like that would be doable.
We only have one board meeting.
Because the board needs to, right? And when, so it's June 27th, and then there's nothing scheduled in July and August.
There's one in July,
Oh,
and then there's 2 months.
okay.
So I just need to pick the date. I think it's totally doable. You know, doing something the second time around is always like way easier.
And
Um,
it won't be my first week on the job. So I'd be like,
Yeah.
"Ooh, set up to get me."
all
So,
around, we have a template. We
Yeah,
kind of know how to do
we can make it work.
it.
Yeah.
I did have a question for Julia on the retreat. We talked earlier about the quorum rule. If 5 or more of you are in are together at the same time, it has to be like a public meeting and recorded. Does that apply to something like a retreat where they'd be
It
together the
does,
whole
but like, I
time?
don't think you should worry about, you know. So somebody's gonna come and sit in the room, I don't. You're not gonna be making any decisions, I would still say like, you should notice it just out of an abundance. Caution, I mean, there's an exemption for the public meeting rules for retreats. But I would say, hopefully there's nothing you're discussing that like couldn't be, openly discussed, that if somebody wanted to come and just observe, they could.
Yes.
Well, so I think then I am proposing that we do, in addition to our regular meetings, that we'll schedule offline, some sort of meeting in August that's an orientation that will help new members get up to speed, and also so we can, I don't know,
I feel like
what do people think about that idea, or what?
I feel like there
What
could be
would we
some
do with that
value
kind of
in,
meeting?
because there's in the points you're raising earlier. Wanting to go through the dashboard, do some more metrics, get some additional feedback on specific areas of quantifying. That felt like a workshop. Some of that probably is a good use of workshop. Some retreat time, if we do have one.
What was proposed as well, I think what also initiated that conversation, just as a reflection on the last meeting, was a discussion around target audiences for engagement around the policy, and like who, like just kind of really digging into like who you all would want to be connecting with over the year, and where, like what communities could really have value in learning about this work, and digging into that as well. But I would agree to your point too, right? Digging into the dashboard, even potentially having some different staff stakeholders come and be able to really give a more in-depth description about like what kinds of strands of work are in motion and what the vision is for how to complete things, and challenges that are transparently always really difficult, and kind of being able to workshop too around like what that could look like, and resolving some of that over the years.
Barbie, I see your hand up? Is that a new hand up?
Yeah, I was gonna just chime in with that same question about Barbie's hand up, but I feel like I feel like a retreat in August would be a great time to talk. I do feel like we're missing an opportunity, around student engagement and coupling it with community engagement. I'm really encouraged by all the amazing steps that folks have made, and the conversation around equity, around inclusion, et cetera. But I think there's a real opportunity to do leadership development with students, with maybe even with community members, but certainly starting with students, understanding, maybe defining a little bit better what we mean by frontline communities, and if frontline communities do include students or student population, like groups of students within the student population. I think the retreat would be a great time to kind of like dive into what possibilities around leadership development, engaging more people. Knowing that we had so many applications last year, I was really surprised. And I feel like we could be, I don't want to chew off too much, especially when we have, I really do feel kind of like a dearth in resources and staff. I don't want to put a ton more work on folks that are already like doing amazing stuff and stretch us too thin. But I think, like August would be a prime time to kind of invest in at least a conversation around building capacity for this committee, and for this work, and for broadening out our. I will say one last thing here, which is that I feel disappointed with the fact that we have these 2 student seats, but students are struggling to take advantage of that. And I just think we can make some adjustments and maybe even corrections. So that's it for me.
Okay, thank you. It sounds like there's pretty broad support for moving ahead with that idea. So maybe Kat can follow up with some folks on shaping that out, and we'll try and set a date sooner than later. Summer, I know, can be tricky to schedule stuff. So we'll try and get as many people, make it work for as many people as possible.
Can I ask a question? As we're short on time, it kind of intersects between the points that have made around student engagement and scheduling. Do we know what the barrier to student engagement has been? Is there something to change as we think about scheduling for next year that would actually make it for students, whoever they are, to engage?
I think we should ask the students that question. I think that's a great
I
question.
know Richard has actually largely been out of town because he travels for like different teams that he's on. So I think that's been a big.
He's coaching tonight. His team made it to some finals, and
That's awesome.
I think they're just also inherently really busy because of the nature of the kind of students that apply for this work. Are just, Danny's a very, like we said at the beginning, Danny just got elected. He's a very busy person. So, but I would love to reach out to them, as like you said, and say like, what are some ways
Maybe
that
we
this
keep
could have been?
scheduling a little flexible and
Yeah,
support of being able to increase
absolutely.
engagement.
Sure.
But I think to the point made earlier also, if we have an established schedule when we're doing the recruiting, that can help people say, actually, no, I know I'm always doing X on that night, and so I can't do that.
Okay.
So that would
I
be,
think we're all in support of
yeah,
increasing soon.
yeah.
But something we could include on the application is, what potential barriers or accommodations or flexibilities, things that would make it easier for you to participate in this kind of work. We can add as a question.
It's already done.
Perfect.
Awesome.
On it. You go.
Yeah, do we have any public comment tonight? Just
We do not.
Okay. So you were going to share with us some info about the PSAF investment plan.
So exciting. So very cool work, very cool opportunity that we have there. So the Portland Clean Energy Fund, for, oh my gosh, a really quick question. Is there anyone here who is not aware of what the Portland Clean Energy Fund is, where I could do a little recap for people generally understand what that, okay, just want to make sure. Has put together their climate investment plan proposal for the next year. It's linked to our public meeting notice and agenda. I'll just share the website really quick on the screen so you can kind of see what it is. But in this investment plan, it's got some really great plans for how to spend the monies that they've collected. And they're taking comments available right now for folks who publics like comment for anyone who's interested in being able to look over and make recommendations about it. And something that's just really exciting is that in this first draft in this draft that they've put together, it includes a section for investment in schools and allocates funding specifically to the different school districts in Portland. About what's the one to both not only to increase infrastructure. And I just stopped sharing because I literally cannot do anything on my computer and talk at the same time. So allocation for money to increase infrastructure in certain schools to be able to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and make climate resilience improvements, as well as funding that is allocated specifically for student-centered projects over the next 5 years. So it's exciting. I just wanted to point that part out specifically, that it's a really great addition of adding schools to the plan. In the past, school districts were not eligible for the PSAF funding unless it was as a host site for a community-based organizations project. So it's kind of a neat way that they've rethought about the way to allocate the funding. And I just wanted to share that if any of you as publicly engaged folks would like to go and review the plan and offer your comment or feedbacks or things, to consider if it feels like they left anything out, or give them a like, this is awesome. I just wanted to encourage that opportunity for civic engagement and participating in that. And then Charity says, yeah, so it's over the next 5 years. So next year would be a proposal phase where we put together the funding proposal of how we envision using the funds, which will actually require a large centralized visioning effort. So that'll kind of, really accelerate some of this things that we've been talking about. And then Charity mentions that if anyone has PSAF funds, our organization is the largest current PSAF grant, and they work in residential buildings, but knows the programs fairly well in the staff as well. So thank you, Charity, for sharing that.
Do we know if a similar encouragement for civic participation has been sent out to students through civic engagement channels?
I'm not sure. I haven't directly sent anything out, but I can definitely encourage our communications department to send out something through their social media, and we might have included it in our newsletter. I don't know when the next newsletter goes out, but we can add that as that opportunity, share it with our sustainability champion teachers. But at our climate summit, we did have PSAF staff there doing a workshop where the students that attended that workshop learned about how to engage in that process too, like providing. So, but yeah, definitely want to be able to share this with students in our community as much as possible, just so they get some great input. It's a good idea.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay, well, we have a few minutes left. Was there any other closing thoughts or comments before we wrap up the meeting?
You wanted feedback on it.
Yeah, if
Okay.
I can, just
Is it 5 minutes? Probably not.
probably not now. But so one of the policy points that it makes is around gas powered equipment in building, or just phasing out gas powered equipment and fossil fuel infrastructure. And so one of the challenges that we're coming up right now with the Jefferson modernization is around backup power required by the state to, or just by, sorry, we're at the end of the day, my brain isn't working, but emergency backup power, which has traditionally been used as like diesel generators to provide that backup power. And the policy has language around certain items where as the market adjusts, those transitions will be made when it's feasible to do so. And so we're negotiating the language right now around feasibility and looking at like, not only like cost trade-offs, but, you know, greenhouse gas emissions, production, thing like that. And so I wanted to get a sense when we're talking about these trade-offs and how to communicate these decisions transparently, like what kinds of data would be really helpful for the community to see and engage with, to be able to like best decide if it's like feasible or not to move with the more compliant item now versus like wait for the market adjust and then like transition to that in the future. So that was as succinct.
It makes sense. How do you understand if the price premium in the current day is justified given the expected election?
Yeah, and then size and other factors too, like so like for example, I think one of the examples was like the generator for this building they're looking at would be the difference between like $200,000 versus like $5 million, and like where do we like, and then what is how much does this operate? What are the greenhouse gas emissions produced? Our electric grid is not currently fossil free, so that also produces greenhouse gas emissions to use battery power. So like, how much is that going to be produced? And then where do we decide what that trade-off is like, are we externally creating the emissions, or are we like globally creating the emissions? Yeah.
What's an emission shift versus an emission
reduction? Yeah. And then also just the size of these current technologies, large like shipping container size for things like, and so that like has an implication on the design of the building. And so those are some of the things that are like discussions that we're trying to negotiate. And I want to be able to get a sense of, okay, as we're figuring out these decisions, we need to be making sure that we are getting data on these specific data points to be able to fully map out, like, here are our options ahead. We can't just say like, oh, it feels like it's a better option to do this one versus this. Like, no, this needs to be a really data informed decision. And then we need to be able to communicate.
It sounds like, kind of a classic old triple bottom line business case, right? And to me, I think, especially as a committee member here, the most important thing to me is that it's documented and like transparent. So there's no perfect way to make those trade-offs, but being clear about like what you've considered and why you're kind of moving forward in one direction or another, and giving folks a chance to respond to that is, I think, the main thing. Maybe others have a good example or something that you use at work that's helpful, because it's
I think
a problem that comes up a lot.
I think you
This is Angela. I would recommend that if we want to be transparent, that we establish some sort of kind of operating agreement or boundaries on what those trade-offs would be before we even have a project. I think that would help us navigate the complexities of the project a little bit easier once we're there. So if we can agree collectively that there, maybe we have a metric that says if it substantially increases the cost by 10%, then that's a trade-off we're not willing to make, because we want to reinvest those dollars into something else that helps the policy. Something where we can just have that, established prior, I think would be really helpful and avoid a lot of problems long term.
I think there's a lot of expertise on the panel that could help with that trade-off evaluation policy ahead of time. Probably not going to get it done tonight, but we can at least make a commitment to help you with it. I also think that once the policy is place. There's really good places to get that data.
Yeah.
Like PAE has done this. I know they've done this evaluation. And there, I think there's some good things worth considering a policy, like making sure we're thinking about true net pricing, because there's a lot of subsidies that exist for the non-emitting resource options nowadays. So it's not a sticker price to sticker price comparison. Thinking of life cycle, so even if if you're doing battery versus diesel generator, they both have 15-20 year life cycle. So it's not just the emissions today, it's what will the emissions be in the future.
I think it's all that, and then the final, it's the 2030. So if, like, does this put the final 2030 goal in jeopardy by making those just something like, are we making trade-offs so that we can still hit 2030
Yeah.
or I think that'd be because that ultimately is.
I was kind of curious
Right?
about that too. It's like, okay, if this is a direction, if this is like, how much does this produce? What are the alternatives? Is there a way that we can offset this with a different activity? So like, I just, these are all really helpful, like points to be considering and to be documenting, and questions that need to be asked and documented before anything like really moves forward. But this landed on my desk like 2 hours ago, or however long ago that was now, where I was like, oh, hey, I've got a great group of people I'm going to talk to about this before we like move anything forward, because we want to make sure that we've got this. I think this decision will need to be, oh yeah, so item in terms of making boundaries around trade-offs could be an August retreat item in terms of provided recommendations. Got it. Thank you. That was the Diane. Just.
But if you need support
Yeah.
sooner,
Yeah, I'll reach out. Yeah, I think a lot of these different things are just coming up in real time. Different projects are underway, and the budget, I don't know, it's challenging. Just literally looking at how we could make the most out of what we've got going on. So this is all super helpful. Thank you.
I think it's time to close up the meeting. Thank you, everybody, for your participation tonight. Thanks, everyone.
thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.